What if I told you that the line between an eternity of purification and immediate entry into paradise hinges on a single choice? A choice so subtle yet so powerful that most of us make it every single day without realizing its eternal weight. This is secret number 13, a revelation hidden in plain sight, a key to unlocking the gates of heaven the moment our life on earth is over. For centuries, we have been taught that our final destination is decided by a lifetime of deeds, a grand tally of our rights and wrongs. But the saints, the mystics who pierced the veil between worlds, they knew something more. They understood that while our actions matter, there is one conscious decision, one specific act of the will that can purify a soul in an instant, accomplishing what years, even centuries in purgatory are meant to do. Today, we journey into the heart of this sacred mystery. We will not be looking at complex theology, but at the raw, unfiltered experiences of a soul who lived with one foot in heaven and one on earth. We will follow the visions of Saint Gemma Galgani, the young mystic who bore the wounds of Christ and spoke with suffering souls as easily as we speak with our friends. She was given the answer, she was shown the choice. And what she learned will change everything you thought you knew about your final moments and the power you hold in your hands right now. This isn't a story about becoming a perfect saint overnight. It's about understanding a divine secret, a spiritual key that Jesus himself revealed to his chosen ones. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you will know the one choice that decides if a soul goes to purgatory or straight to heaven. To understand this profound secret, we must first understand the woman to whom it was revealed. Gemma Galgani was not a theologian in a library. She was a living testament to the supernatural. Born in a small Italian town in 1878, her life was a tapestry of immense suffering and even more immense love for God. From a young age, she was marked for something extraordinary. She saw her guardian angel, spoke with him, and even allowed him to carry messages for her to her confessor. She was visited by the Virgin Mary, Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows, and Jesus himself. But her most famous and visible gift was the stigmata. On Thursday evenings, she would fall into an ecstasy of sorrow, and the wounds of Christ's passion would bleed freely from her hands, feet, and side, only to vanish by Sunday, leaving no trace. This was not a life of peaceful contemplation. It was a life of spiritual combat, of physical agony, and of a love so intense it literally wounded her. But why her? Why was this young, frail woman chosen to be a window into the afterlife? Because her heart was completely open. She held nothing back from God, and in return, God held nothing back from her. He trusted her with secrets of the spiritual realm, including the agonizing reality of purgatory. You see, for Gemma, purgatory wasn't just a doctrine in a catechism. It was a place she visited in spirit, and a place whose inhabitants visited her. Souls, cloaked in the flames of purification, would appear in her small room. They weren't frightening apparitions. They were souls in desperate need, souls who had loved God but had not loved Him perfectly enough on earth. They were family members, priests she had known, and consecrated souls who were now paying the price for their earthly attachments and imperfections. They came to her for one reason. They needed her prayers and her sacrifices. Gemma could feel their torment. She described it not just as a fire that burns, but as a fire of intense, agonizing love. A burning desire to be with God, a desire that was itself the purification, as they were held back by the stains of their own unrepented, unatoned-for choices. She saw firsthand what held a soul back. She saw the small vanities, the tiny resentments, the attachments to worldly comforts, all of which had to be burned away before they could bear the sight of perfect holiness. Through these countless encounters, a pattern began to emerge. Gemma started to see a common denominator, a single thread that connected the fates of so many of these souls. She noticed that the length and intensity of their purification often related back to one specific area of their earthly life, one specific choice they repeatedly made or failed to make. It wasn't about the gravity of the sin alone. It was about their response to something God gives to every single one of us. Have you ever wondered if the small, everyday struggles you face have a purpose beyond just making life difficult? What if the very pains and frustrations you try so hard to avoid are actually the keys to your immediate entry into heaven? Because what Gemma was about to discover, hidden within the crucible of daily suffering, was the first clue to this divine choice. The clue lies in a concept our modern world has taught us to fear, to avoid, and to medicate at all costs: suffering. For Saint Gemma, and for the souls who visited her, suffering was not a meaningless tragedy. It was a currency. It was a furnace. It was the raw material of sanctity and the fastest path to God. And within our response to it lies the first half of the great choice. Every day, we are presented with countless opportunities for this choice. It might be a chronic illness, a difficult relationship, a financial struggle, or simply the small daily annoyances that wear away at our peace. The world tells us to complain, to become bitter, to numb the pain, or to find someone to blame. But heaven offers a different path, a path of acceptance. This is not a passive resignation. It is not giving up. It is an active, powerful decision of the will. It is looking at the cross placed on your shoulders, whatever it may be, and saying yes. It is the choice to stop fighting against the reality of your situation and instead to unite your pain with the pain that Christ endured on His cross. This is what Gemma did. Her entire life was a yes to suffering. When the pains of the stigmata racked her body, she didn't pray for them to be taken away. Instead, she offered them for the conversion of sinners. When she suffered from debilitating illnesses that left her bedridden, she offered her physical imprisonment for the release of souls from their spiritual prison in purgatory. She saw every ache, every sorrow, every moment of desolation, not as a burden, but as a priceless gift, a piece of the true cross given directly to her by Jesus. This act of acceptance and offering performs a spiritual alchemy. It begins the process of purification here on earth. Purgatory, at its core, is the place where a soul's self-will is burned away. It's where our attachments to comfort, our pride, our vanity, and our resistance to God's will are purged, so that we can become pure love, ready for the union of heaven. When we willingly accept our sufferings on earth, we are choosing to enter that purifying fire now. We are telling God, I want your will more than I want my own comfort. I want you more than I want a life without pain. Each time we accept a hardship without complaint, each time we offer a frustration for the love of God, we are chipping away at the very things that would hold us back after death. We are, in essence, serving our purgatory in this life, not the next. The souls who appeared to Gemma confirmed this truth in the most chilling and awe-inspiring ways. They would tell her of the specific earthly attachments that now caused them the most intense pain. A priest mourned his attachment to his reputation. A nun lamented her small comforts and lack of mortification. They all saw with perfect clarity how their refusal to embrace the small crosses of daily life had led them to the great purifying pains of purgatory. They had spent their lives avoiding the very medicine that could have healed them completely. But how does a lifetime of accepting suffering culminate in a single final choice? It's more than just a general attitude. There is a specific act of the will, a conscious decision that can be made, which gathers all the merit of a life of accepted suffering and applies it in a single, powerful moment. What is this act, And how did the suffering souls themselves describe its incredible power to Saint Gemma? The answer they gave her reveals the very heart of this mystery. The souls in Purgatory revealed to Gemma that the opposite of acceptance is attachment. It's the clinging to worldly things, worldly honors, and even our own will that stains the soul. These attachments are like heavy chains that we forge link by link throughout our lives. When we die, these chains must be melted away, and that melting is the fire of Purgatory. Think about it in your own life. What are you attached to? Is it your comfort, your reputation, the approval of others? Is it a particular plan you have for your life which you refuse to let go of even when God is clearly closing doors? These are not necessarily sinful things in themselves, but the attachment to them, the placing of them before or even alongside God's will, is what creates the debt that must be paid. Gemma saw this with heartbreaking clarity. She saw a soul suffering intensely for having been too attached to their family's wealth, not because they were greedy, but because they relied on it for their security instead of relying on divine providence. She saw another soul being purified for their attachment to their own opinion, always needing to be right, a subtle form of pride that had gone unchecked. These revelations taught her a vital lesson. The degree of our purification is directly proportional to the degree of our detachment. And this brings us to the second half of the great choice. It is not enough to simply accept suffering. We must also actively and consciously choose to detach ourselves from everything that is not God. This choice of detachment is not about living a cold, joyless life. It is about reordering our loves. It is about loving God first and foremost and loving everything else in and through Him. It's about holding the gifts of this world, our families, our careers, our possessions, with an open hand, recognizing that they are temporary blessings from God, not the source of our ultimate happiness. Gemma practiced this detachment to a heroic degree. She owned almost nothing. When given a beautiful new prayer book, she immediately gave it away, fearing she might become too attached to it. When praised for her piety, it caused her genuine distress, as she feared becoming attached to the good opinion of others. She was in a constant state of letting go, of emptying herself so that God could fill her. This is the spiritual work that, for most of us, is left for Purgatory. We spend our lives accumulating, clinging, and defining ourselves by what we have and what people think of us. Then in Purgatory, God must lovingly but painfully strip all of that away until only the core of our soul, the part that was made for Him, remains. So the choice becomes clearer. On one hand, we have the acceptance of our crosses. On the other, the conscious detachment from worldly things. These two actions are like two oars in a boat, rowing the soul directly towards the shores of heaven. When we accept our suffering, we are embracing the will of God. When we practice detachment, we are letting go of our own will. Together, they form a perfect act of surrender. But what happens when these two choices meet at the most critical moment of our existence? What happens when a soul who has practiced this acceptance and detachment throughout their life faces the moment of death? This is where the secret is fully revealed. This is where a lifetime of small choices culminates in one final, definitive act that can bypass Purgatory entirely. Gemma was shown exactly what this act is, and it is something available to every single one of us right now. It is the key that turns a life of faith into an eternity of immediate glory. The great secret, the culmination of this twofold path of acceptance and detachment, is the choice to forgive. Not just to forgive others, which is a commandment, but to forgive God. This may sound shocking, even blasphemous at first. How can we, finite creatures, presume to forgive an infinitely perfect and just God? But this is not about forgiving God for a wrongdoing. It is about forgiving Him for not conforming to our will. It is the final, ultimate act of surrender. It is looking back at your entire life, all the pain, all the loss, all the unanswered prayers, all the moments you felt abandoned and misunderstood, and saying with your entire being, "Your will, not mine, be done. I accept it all. I forgive the plan I had for myself and embrace the plan you had for me. I let go of every last shred of resentment, every what if, every why me, and I trust you completely." This is the one choice that decides everything. It is the final and most perfect act of detachment. A soul can arrive at the moment of death still clinging to some small bitterness towards God for a life that didn't go as planned. They may have loved God, followed the commandments, and even accepted much suffering, but they hold on to that one last kernel of self-will, that one final question of why. That small, unsurrendered part of the soul is the very thing that needs to be purified. It is a refusal to trust God's goodness completely. Gemma saw this in her visions. She saw souls who were good people, devout even, who were held in purgatory because they died with a subtle resentment towards God for their sufferings. They accepted them externally, but their hearts never fully let go of their own desires. They never made that final, terrifying, and liberating choice to forgive God for not being the God they wanted Him to be, and to love Him for the God He truly is. This choice is the key that unlocks the treasury of merits gained through a life of accepted suffering. When a soul makes this final act of loving surrender, they are essentially telling God, "I offer back to you every tear, every pain, every moment of suffering I ever endured, not as a complaint, but as a gift of love. I unite it all to the cross of your Son, and I desire nothing but you." In that moment, a profound spiritual transaction occurs. The purifying power of Christ's suffering, which the soul has tapped into throughout its life by accepting its own crosses, is fully applied. The soul has, in its final moment of freedom, chosen to complete its own purification. It has willingly stepped into the fire of divine love on this side of the veil, and so has no need for the purifying fire on the other side. This isn't a loophole. It is the very logic of love. God does not desire purgatory for anyone. It is a mercy, a final hospital for the soul. But for those who choose to undergo the healing in this life, through the radical acceptance of His will and the complete surrender of their own, the hospital is no longer necessary. They have chosen to become saints on earth, and so they are ready for the immediate company of the saints in heaven. But how do we practice this? How do we prepare ourselves to make this choice in our final moments? It is not something we can simply decide to do at the end. It is a habit of the heart, cultivated over a lifetime. Gemma's life shows us the way. She practiced this forgiveness, this surrender, every single day. Every time she felt a pang of pain, every time a plan was frustrated, it was a new opportunity to say, "Jesus, I accept this from your hand. I trust you." It starts with the small things, the traffic jam on the way to an important appointment, the unexpected bill, the unkind word from a coworker. Do you react with frustration, anger, and a sense of injustice? Or do you see it as a small opportunity from God to practice detachment from your own plan, to accept His, and to forgive the disruption to your will? Each time you choose the latter, you are strengthening the spiritual muscle needed to make the final, definitive choice when it matters most. Let's bring this down to a very practical level. Imagine two souls. Both are devout Catholics. They go to Mass, they pray the Rosary, they try to live good lives. Both are diagnosed with a long, painful illness that will eventually take their lives. This illness becomes the defining cross of their final years. The first soul, let's call him Thomas, fights it every step of the way. He prays desperately for a cure, which is a good and natural thing to do. But when the cure doesn't come, a subtle bitterness takes root in his heart. He continues to go to church, but his prayer becomes a negotiation. "Why me, God? I've been faithful. I don't deserve this." He endures his suffering, but he never truly accepts it. He sees it as an injustice, a disruption to the life he was supposed to have. He dies with this question still burning in his soul.
He loves God, so he is saved. But that unsurrendered part of his will, that attachment to his own idea of justice, must now be purified. He enters purgatory. The second soul, let's call her Claire, has a different response. When she receives her diagnosis, she too prays for healing. But she adds a crucial line to her prayer. "But if this is your will for me, give me the grace to bear it with love." As the illness progresses and the suffering intensifies, she makes a conscious choice. Every morning, she awakens and says, "Jesus, I offer you all my pains of this day. I unite them to your passion for the salvation of souls." She consciously forgives the life of health she thought she would have. She lets go of her plans.
In her moments of deepest agony, she doesn't ask, "Why me?" but "How can I use this?" She is actively choosing to undergo her purification on earth. When Claire reaches her final moments, she looks back not with bitterness, but with a strange and holy gratitude. She sees how her suffering detached her from the world and attached her to Christ. Her final act is not a question, but a statement of perfect trust. "My God, I have held nothing back from you. Receive me." Because she has already been purified in the crucible of accepted suffering, because she has made that final total choice of surrender, there is nothing left to hold her back. Her soul flies straight to heaven. This is the secret Saint Gemma lived and died for. Her life was a constant yes to the will of God, no matter how painful or confusing. The souls in purgatory were her teachers, showing her in vivid detail the consequences of a life of resistance versus a life of surrender. They were a living, or rather a suffering, testament to the fact that God allows us the dignity of choosing the nature of our purification, either unwillingly in the next life or willingly in this one. This choice is not about the magnitude of the suffering. Claire's cross was not necessarily heavier than Thomas's. The difference was not in the what, but in the how. It was in the response of the will. A person living a relatively comfortable life, who accepts the small daily annoyances with love and surrender, can achieve a higher degree of purity than a person who endures a great martyrdom with a heart full of resentment. This is incredibly hopeful news. It means that the power is in our hands right now. You don't have to wait for a great trial to begin this process. You can start today with the frustrating email, the headache that won't go away, the plan that falls through. Each of these is a small classroom for the soul, a training ground for the final exam. Each is an invitation from God to practice the great choice. But there is a danger here, a misunderstanding that could lead us down the wrong path. We might be tempted to think that this is about earning our way into heaven through sheer willpower and endurance. That is not the Catholic faith. It is not about our strength, but about our weakness and what we allow God to do within it. How then do we ensure our acceptance of suffering is not an act of pride, but an act of true, sanctifying love? The answer lies in the source of our strength, a source that Gemma relied on every hour of every day. The source of this transformative power is not our own strength. If we try to accept suffering through sheer grit and determination, we will inevitably fall into either pride or despair. Pride, if we succeed for a time, believing we are strong. Despair, when we fail, believing we are weak. The secret that Saint Gemma knew so well is that the grace to make this choice comes from outside of ourselves. It flows directly from the sacraments and a personal relationship with Jesus. Gemma's life was centered on the Eucharist. For her, Holy Communion was not just a symbol. It was her daily bread, her medicine, her strength. It was the physical infusion of the divine life into her suffering body. When she received Jesus, she was receiving the very one who suffered perfectly, the one who made the ultimate choice of surrender in the Garden of Gethsemane. His strength became her strength. This is why the sacraments are not optional extras for a Christian life. They are the lifeblood. In confession, we are cleansed of the sins that fuel our attachments and our resistance to God's will.
We admit our weakness and receive His mercy, which softens our hearts and makes them more pliable to His plan. In the Eucharist, we receive the grace to actually live out that surrender. We are literally consuming the body and blood of the one who said, "Not my will, but yours be done." Without this sacramental grace, our attempts to accept suffering are like trying to run a marathon without food or water. We may start with good intentions, but we will quickly run out of energy. The souls who spoke to Gemma often lamented their lukewarm approach to the sacraments on earth. They saw, too late, that the very strength they needed to purify their souls in this life had been freely offered to them every single day at the altar, and they had approached it casually, distractedly, or not at all.
Furthermore, Gemma's acceptance of suffering was not a grim, stoic endurance. It was a conversation. It was part of her intimate, personal relationship with Jesus. She spoke to Him about her pain. She complained to Him. She cried to Him, but always within the context of love and trust. She would say things like, "Jesus, this hurts so much, but I accept it for you. Help me to bear it." This is a crucial distinction. We are not called to be emotionless statues. We are called to be like Christ in the garden, who sweated blood in His agony and pleaded with the Father, "Let this cup pass from me," before making that final, perfect act of surrender. We can bring our raw, honest humanity to God. We can tell Him we are scared, we are angry, we are confused. The surrender comes not in suppressing these feelings, but in handing them over to Him. It's saying, "Here is my fear, here is my anger. I can't handle it. You take it. I still choose your will." This is how we avoid the trap of pride. We are constantly acknowledging our own powerlessness and our total dependence on Him. Our suffering then ceases to be about us. It is no longer my pain that I am heroically enduring. It becomes our pain, a shared experience between the soul and its Savior. It is a participation in His redemptive work. So, the great choice is not made in a vacuum. It is prepared for in the confessional, fueled by the Eucharist, and lived out in a daily conversation of love with the one who suffers alongside us. It is a path of humility, not of strength. It is about becoming small enough for God to be big within us. And now we must ask the final, most practical question. Knowing all this, what are the concrete steps we can take, starting today, to prepare our souls to make this choice? How do we build this habit of the heart so that it becomes second nature, ready for that final, all-important moment? Saint Gemma's life gives us a clear roadmap, a spiritual training regimen for the soul who desires to fly straight to heaven. The path laid out before us by Saint Gemma and the souls she encountered is not one of gloom, but of profound and radical hope. It tells us that our eternal destiny is not a lottery, but a choice. It is a choice we prepare for with every small act of surrender, every accepted frustration, and every conscious act of detachment from our own will. Secret number 13 is not a complicated formula. It is the simple, devastatingly powerful logic of love. It is the understanding that the purifying fire of God's love can be entered into willingly in this life through the cross, or necessarily in the next through purgatory. The choice is to stop running from the very thing that can make us saints, to see our sufferings not as a curse, but as a carpenter's tools in the hands of God, shaping our souls into a perfect image of His Son. It is the choice to forgive God for our lives not being what we planned, and to fall in love with the life He has written for us. This is the choice that untethers the soul from the earth. It is the choice that prepares us in our final moment to look upon the face of our Creator not with the fear of a debtor, but with the confidence of a child running into the arms of their Father. A child who has held nothing back, and for whom, in return, heaven holds nothing back. Turning insights into action, your practical guide in the next 24 hours. Morning act of surrender.
As soon as you wake up tomorrow, even before your feet touch the ground, make a small prayer of surrender inspired by Saint Gemma. Say something like, "My Jesus, today I accept everything that your hand sends me, all joys, all difficulties, all frustrations. I unite them to your passion for the conversion of sinners and the liberation of souls from purgatory. May your will be done, not mine." This sets the tone for a day of conscious acceptance. The Yes Journal. Keep a small note on your phone or a piece of paper in your pocket. Every time something small frustrates you today, a traffic jam, a rude email, a canceled plan, instead of complaining, pause for 3 seconds and think or write the word yes. This is your yes to God's will in that moment. It's a practical exercise to train your surrender muscle, transforming annoyance into an act of prayer.
In the next 7 days, the Rosary for Souls. Dedicate a rosary this week specifically to the souls in purgatory, especially those who suffered most for not surrendering to God's will. As you meditate on the mysteries, ask Saint Gemma to pray with you. Ask God for the grace to learn from their mistakes, to embrace your own crosses now so you can lighten their burden and avoid your own. Practice active detachment. Choose a small thing you enjoy. It could be sugar in your coffee, listening to music in the car, or watching a specific show. And give it up for 1 entire day this week. Do it silently, without telling anyone. Offer this small sacrifice with the prayer, "Jesus, I detach myself from this small thing to show that I desire you more than my own comfort. Accept this small act of love." In the next 30 days, confession of self-will. In your next confession this month, focus not only on your sinful acts, but also on your resistances to God's will. Confess the times you have been bitter, resentful, or stubborn regarding the circumstances God has allowed in your life. Specifically, ask the priest for absolution for your self-will and ask for the grace to surrender more completely. The letter of forgiveness to God. Set aside some time alone and write a letter to God. Be completely honest. Write about all the pains, disappointments, and losses in your life where you felt abandoned or wronged by Him. Pour it all out. At the end of the letter, conclude with an act of will, a prayer of surrender, forgiving the plan you had for yourself and choosing to accept His. You can keep this letter or safely destroy it as a sign that you are releasing everything to Him. This is a powerful exercise to practice the final choice we spoke of today. Remember, the path to heaven is not paved with a life without suffering, but with a suffering that has been transformed into love. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next revelations. Comment on what you thought of this video and what city you are watching us from. Share this with someone who needs to hear this message.